Husband stopped loving me after his divorced brother moved back to town, filed divorce papers without warning, threw a party calling me a bullet he dodged, then spent the next year showing up outside my apartment begging me to remarry. When we first got married, I didn't think we were perfect, but we were solid. We argued like any couple, disagreed over a couple of things, and got on each other's nerves, especially during tax season or when someone forgot to take the trash out. But we always worked through it. At least, that's what I thought. I guess I didn't see the cracks starting to form until his brother moved back into town. His elder brother, Caden, had been through 3 divorces by the time he was 42. Each one messier than the last. He wore them like battle scars, bragging about how women always flip the script and how marriage was a trap for men who don't know better. My ex, Damon, used to roll his eyes at that kind of talk. He'd say his brother was bitter and burned too many bridges, and he was just salty that he never picked the right woman. I agreed, but I never said it out loud. I didn't want to get between them. It started with weekend visits. Caden would swing by for drinks, and I'd hear them laughing in the living room while I made dinner or folded laundry. I didn't think much of it until it turned into daily phone calls and guys' nights that got more frequent and longer. Damon would come home with that smug, half-dazed look, like he'd just been handed some kind of deep wisdom. He started picking at everything I did. If I asked him to help clean the kitchen, he'd say I was nagging. If I told him I was tired from work, he'd say I was being dramatic. One night he told me that I sucked the fun out of everything and that I always had to be in control. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe he was stressed. But it wasn't stress. It was Caden, feeding him poison in the form of advice. He once told me that Caden had opened his eyes. That he'd been blind to my manipulation. I didn't even know what that meant. I never once told Damon what job to take, where to go, or who to hang out with. If anything, I was the one always adjusting my schedule, canceling plans to accommodate his career moves and his social life. Things spiraled quickly after that. Damon became distant. Cold. He stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings. He stopped coming to bed on time, always staying up late, scrolling through something on his phone, laughing at texts I wasn't privy to. I didn't snoop. I didn't accuse. I tried talking to him, just honest conversations, asking if he was okay, if something was bothering him, if we needed to work through something. He always brushed it off. Said I was overreacting. Then one morning, he sat me down at the dining table, didn't even make eye contact, and told me he was filing for divorce. Just like that. No warning. No mention of couples counseling or taking space or anything like that. Just straight up divorce. He said he felt trapped. That he'd been living a lie and had finally realized that I wasn't the right person for him. He said we were fundamentally incompatible and that the marriage had been a mistake from the beginning. His tone was rehearsed, like he'd practiced it in the mirror or worse, with Caden. I didn't cry. I just sat there, stunned, while he pushed a printed document across the table. It was already drafted. I didn't even know he'd seen a lawyer. The weirdest part was how calm he was. Cold, even. Like he was doing me a favor. He said he was trying to be amicable and civil and that this was the best way forward for both of us. I didn't say much. I couldn't. I felt like I was watching it happen to someone else. The next few weeks were a blur. I moved out because I couldn't stand being in that house with him walking around like nothing happened. I stayed with a friend while I started looking for a small place of my own. Meanwhile, he posted on social media about starting fresh and how freedom feels good. He even posted a picture of himself and Caden with matching beers and the caption "Brothers before baggage." I remember seeing that post and just closing my phone. Not because it hurt, but because it was so pathetic. Here was a grown man celebrating his divorce like it was spring break, while the guy cheering him on had 3 failed marriages behind him and nothing to show for it but a couch to crash on and a neck tattoo he kept covering up in job interviews. People around us started taking sides. Some reached out to me quietly, saying they were sorry and that they didn't understand what Damon was thinking. Others just disappeared. But I didn't chase anyone. I let it all happen. I signed the papers. I didn't argue for more money or fight over the car. I just wanted peace. I remember the day the divorce was finalized. Damon sent a short text, "It's done. Good luck with everything." That was it. No remorse. No closure. Just a casual farewell like we were coworkers parting ways after a project ended. I didn't reply. I just took a walk by myself that afternoon. No destination, no music, no phone. Just the sound of gravel under my shoes and the strange, heavy relief of knowing I was finally free from someone who chose to throw me away over cheap opinions and broken advice. What he didn't know, what he still doesn't understand, is that you can't undo this kind of betrayal. There's no going back from it. No second chance after you've made someone feel replaceable. At least, not with me. He thought he'd have the upper hand, that I'd crumble or come begging. But I didn't. And that, I think, is what started to unravel him. Because after the divorce was finalized, it felt like the air had shifted. Not just in the legal sense, but something in me had changed, too. It was as if the weight of constantly trying to explain myself, constantly shrinking to avoid setting him off, had finally lifted. I wasn't holding my breath. I moved into a small apartment not too far from work. It wasn't fancy or particularly stylish, but it was mine. I didn't need to ask anyone about the paint color. I didn't have to compromise on furniture or justify why I wanted throw pillows that actually matched. It was quiet, peaceful, and just big enough for me to stretch out without feeling like I was floating alone in space. I stayed off social media for a while, mostly because I didn't want to see whatever circus Damon and his brother were putting on. But word still made its way to me. Friends would mention that he seemed to be doing well or that he was glowing in his new single life. Apparently, he and Caden had thrown a freedom party the week after the divorce went through. He invited a bunch of his college buddies, ordered custom donuts that said things like dodged a bullet and no more nagging, and posted pictures like he'd just won the lottery. At first, I didn't care. I told myself he was allowed to process however he wanted, even if it was immature. But there was a part of me, the human part, that felt humiliated. We'd been married for almost 5 years. I gave up job offers and vacations, and even a promotion in another city, because he didn't want to relocate. I spent holidays with his family, even when mine was begging to see me. I stood by him during his career changes, his rough patches, his late night insecurities. And now I was a punchline. A donut. But fine. Let him celebrate. Let him pretend he escaped some kind of villain. I didn't fight the narrative. I didn't post vague quotes or try to defend myself. Instead, I went to therapy. Every Tuesday at 6 p.m. I talked about the parts of myself I had buried during that marriage, about how often I second-guessed my own instincts just to keep the peace. My therapist told me I had nothing to prove, and it took a while, but I started to believe her. Meanwhile, Damon assumed I'd fall apart. I know that because a mutual friend of ours slipped up one day and mentioned that he was waiting for the moment I'd call him crying. Apparently, Caden told him that women always come crawling back, especially when they realize they can't handle life alone. Damon believed it. He told people that I was too soft, too dependent, too high maintenance to last without him. I didn't bother correcting anyone. I just focused on rebuilding. I picked up extra hours at work, not out of desperation, but because I liked staying busy. I used the extra cash to buy myself things I used to feel guilty about, a new bean bag, a better coffee machine, even a weekend trip to a cabin just to unplug. I stopped walking on eggshells and started making decisions like I owed nobody an explanation. The funny thing was, the silence from my end seemed to unsettle him more than if I'd screamed. About 3 months after the divorce, he texted me. Nothing heavy, just a casual "Hey, hope you're doing okay." I stared at it for a while, unsure of what he wanted. A conversation? Closure? A breadcrumb to pull me back in? I left it on read. A week later, he texted again. This time, it was a picture of a takeout meal from our favorite Thai place with the caption "Made me think of you." I didn't answer that one either. That's when I knew something was shifting. Damon wasn't as confident as he had acted. The victory lap was wearing thin, and real life was starting to creep in. The house we shared had become his bachelor cave, but from what I heard, Caden had unofficially moved in. What started as just for a few nights turned into he's helping me through a transition. They both quit their jobs and had plans to start a business together. A podcast, I think. Something about real talk from real men. God. It bombed. Naturally. They recorded a few episodes where they ranted about marriage, toxic women, and how men need to wake up. The response was unkind. Listeners dragged them for being bitter and out of touch. One reviewer called them two uncles yelling into a mic after 3 beers. By the 3rd episode, they quietly stopped uploading. Damon started to look tired. Even in pictures. You could see it in his face, the weight of someone who expected a victory parade and instead got a long, awkward silence. He lost a few close friends, too. Not because of the divorce, but because people started realizing how easily he turned on someone who had stood by him. Some folks reached out to me and said they didn't want to choose sides but that they hoped I was okay. I told them I was more than okay. I didn't need to convince anyone. I just kept moving forward. I started reconnecting with people I'd drifted from during the marriage, old college friends, former coworkers, even my cousin who used to tell me I'd gotten too quiet after I got married. They all said the same thing now, that I looked more alive. Lighter. Happier. And I was. It wasn't some dramatic overnight glow up, But piece by piece, I was finding myself again. The more I flourished, the quieter Damon got. His social media slowed down. The posts about living his best life faded. There were no more party photos, no smug captions, no check-ins at bars or brunch spots. Just the occasional meme repost or a blurry group photo where he didn't look like he wanted to be there. I wasn't obsessing. But people talk. Mutual friends mention things. And what I heard, over and over, was that Damon was not the same. I guess when the noise faded and the spotlight dimmed, he realized he'd burned the only bridge that actually mattered. But I wasn't looking back. Update 1. By the time summer rolled around, I had gotten used to living alone, not just physically, but mentally. There were no more sudden loud voices in the hallway, no random lectures about how I was too emotional, and no passive-aggressive sighs when I did something he didn't like. The silence wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. I could actually hear myself think. Meanwhile, Damon had started unraveling. I didn't have to stalk his page to know things weren't working out for him. People kept talking. Not in a cruel way, more like confused concern. His brother Caden, the self-appointed expert in all things manhood, had moved out after a fight that supposedly ended with Damon throwing a glass across the kitchen. A neighbor told one of my friends she heard shouting for 3 nights straight. Caden went back to his third ex-wife for a while. I almost laughed when I heard that. So much for free man living. I guess even walking red flags have their limits. But Damon? He stayed behind in the house we once called home, trying to turn it into a version of freedom he never really wanted. From what I gathered, his new job was on shaky ground, too. After missing a few deadlines and calling in sick more than usual, they cut his hours. That might have been the final straw for his ego. That's when he started reaching out again, not just with subtle hope you're doing good texts, but actual messages that sounded almost nostalgic. He said he missed talking to me. He said he kept seeing things that reminded him of us. He even said he'd been thinking a lot about the choices he made and that maybe he hadn't been in the best headspace back then. I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, but because I had nothing to say. What could I possibly say to someone who broke me down so easily just because his brother, a man who can't keep a goldfish alive, told him I wasn't worth the effort? But Damon wasn't used to being ignored. Not by me. I think that's what really got to him. The fact that I wasn't crying, wasn't begging, wasn't showing up in his inbox trying to win him back, it chipped away at whatever pride he had left. One weekend, I bumped into him at a mutual friend's birthday gathering. I hadn't planned on going until the last minute, and I almost turned around when I saw his car parked outside. But I told myself I wasn't hiding from anyone. Not anymore. He looked tired. That was the first thing I noticed. There were bags under his eyes, his shirt was wrinkled like he hadn't ironed it in weeks, and he had this look, not of anger, not of arrogance, but of confusion. Like he didn't quite know what to do now that his freedom didn't feel as sweet as he imagined. He tried to play it cool. Gave me a slight nod, made small talk with someone nearby, but I could feel his eyes flicking back to me every few seconds. Eventually, he came over. Said hi. Asked how I was doing. Told me I looked different. I just smiled and said I'd been doing fine. Which was true. Then he asked if we could talk sometime, like really talk. Said he had some things he needed to get off his chest. I shrugged and told him maybe another time, then walked away before he could say more. The old me would have stayed. The old me would have felt obligated to hear him out, to make him feel better, to not leave him hanging. But I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't his wife anymore. After that, his messages got bolder. He sent long paragraphs talking about the good times we had, about how he didn't realize how much I did for him until it was gone. He said he had been influenced and misled, and he used the word brainwashed more than once, as if that somehow excused his choices. He even said that Caden had manipulated him out of jealousy, claiming that he never liked me because I kept Damon grounded, and Caden didn't want anyone around who had their life together. I didn't reply to that one either. Instead, I focused on myself. I started a small side hustle, something I'd always wanted to do but never had time for when I was running around trying to keep someone else's life together. I took weekend hikes, joined a book club, and even reconnected with a friend from college who invited me to a local networking group. Damon must have sensed that I was moving forward without him because that's when he tried the next tactic, guilt. He sent me a message saying he'd lost everything and that I was the only person who truly knew him. He said he felt hollow and that life didn't feel real anymore. He said he made the biggest mistake of his life and wanted us to get married again, to start over. That he would do it right this time. That he'd changed. I just stared at the message, dumbfounded. Not because I was tempted. But because it was the first time he realized that the consequences weren't temporary. That I wasn't just a phone call away. That divorcing me didn't come with a reset button. He had chosen to believe the one man in his life who couldn't even keep his own relationships intact, and now that reality had settled in, he wanted a do-over. But life doesn't work like that. I didn't reply. Instead, I set my phone down and opened the window. The air smelled like spring. Like beginnings, not returns. Let him sit with it. Update 2, it had been months since Damon first asked me to marry him again. He kept trying. Not every day, but often enough that I had to mute his number. He sent voice notes, texts, and even a photo of a handwritten letter. In it, he said he finally realized how deep his mistake went, that he had let the wrong person walk away, and how he couldn't stop imagining what life would be like if we just hit reset. But the thing is, I had hit reset. Just not with him. I never answered. I never gave him the reaction he wanted. That, I think, made it worse for him. Soon enough, he started showing up. The first time was at an art pop-up event at a local community market I was attending with a friend. I was helping her. I was setting up a display table, busy taping down the price tags, when I saw him, standing near the edge of the crowd, hands shoved in his pockets, watching me like he'd never seen me before. He didn't say anything that day. Just stood there for a while and left. I brushed it off. Maybe he finally understood it was too late. But then he came to my apartment building. He waited in the parking lot, sitting on the hood of his car with a plastic bag full of my old stuff, a mug, a sweater, some random books. Things I hadn't asked for. When I saw him from my window, my stomach twisted. I didn't go down. I texted him to leave the bag at the door and go. He stayed another 10 minutes before driving off. And just like that, it became a pattern. He started popping up in the background of my life like some ghost who didn't know he was already gone. Friends told me to block him. I had. But the messages came from different numbers, social media accounts, even an email once. He wasn't threatening or mean. He was just persistent. Delusional, even. Eventually, I gave in, not because I missed him, but because I was tired. I agreed to meet him for coffee in a public space, where I could leave easily if things got uncomfortable. He looked like someone who finally saw the damage but couldn't figure out where to start patching it. He thanked me for showing up. Said he didn't expect me to say yes. I told him I hadn't said yes. I just said I'd listen. He nodded slowly and admitted he didn't deserve that much. He said he had been blind, weak, and too easily swayed by someone who thrived on chaos. That Caden had gotten into his head, twisted every little frustration he had ever vented into reasons why our marriage was doomed. He told me he missed my presence. My calm. My way of grounding him when everything got messy. Then he said the words he must have rehearsed 100 times in his head. He wanted us to get married again. Not just date. Not just talk. Married. He said he wanted to start over with a clean slate, now that he'd seen the light. And for the first time in this entire mess, I laughed. Not a mocking laugh. Just disbelief. I told him he didn't miss me. He missed the version of his life where someone else carried the emotional weight. He missed stability, peace, and a quiet home that didn't feel like a battlefield. He missed being loved unconditionally. But he didn't miss me, the person. He missed what I gave him. And now that no one else was stepping in to do the heavy lifting, he suddenly remembered my worth. I said I wasn't a backup plan for when freedom turned out to be lonely. He got quiet. Looked like he wanted to argue, but couldn't. Because he knew it was true. He asked me if I'd really never considered giving him another chance. I told him no, not once. He had every opportunity to think for himself back then. I wasn't some mystery he had to figure out. I had been loyal, open, and honest from day one. And yet, when the time came to choose between me and his brother's opinion, he picked the man who couldn't even stay in his own relationships. And he picked him easily. I reminded him how fast he filed those divorce papers. How he moved through it like it was a minor inconvenience. Like our marriage meant nothing, the moment someone planted doubt in his head. And now he expected me to forget that? He started tearing up. Said he hated himself for what he did. That he couldn't sleep at night. That he would never find someone like me again. I told him that was the first honest thing he'd said. Then I stood up, thanked him for the coffee, paid, and left. Not because I was angry. But because I had finally said everything I needed to say. There was no hatred left in me. Just closure. After that, the messages stopped. I think it finally hit him that the woman he used to know was gone, not just from his life, but from the version of herself that once would have taken him back. I wasn't her anymore. I was someone who had learned to love her own peace more than any broken promise. Update 3, as I said previously, after that final coffee meeting with Damon, my life became noticeably quieter. No more messages. No more surprise appearances. No more late night calls or accidental run-ins at the places he knew I frequented. Just silence. And it was beautiful. It gave me the space I hadn't realized I'd been craving. I started painting not as therapy, but as ambition. My apartment transformed into a bright, chaotic little studio full of canvases and paint-streaked jars. I'd gone from the woman whose husband walked out on her to someone with a purpose that didn't revolve around being someone's wife. It felt right. But just as I was beginning to believe the storm had passed for good, I got a call one evening, from Damon's mother. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. She started the conversation with pleasantries I didn't return. Then she sighed, her tone suddenly shifting from awkward to anxious. She said Damon had been in a car accident. Not life-threatening, but enough to shake him. A few cracked ribs, a concussion, and a whole lot of regret apparently poured out while he was in the ER. He'd asked for me. I stood in my kitchen with the phone pressed to my ear, listening to this woman, who never much liked me when we were married, now trying to play mediator between her son and the ghost of his past. She said she wasn't asking me to take him back. She just thought I'd want to know. That maybe I'd like to hear from him one last time, now that he finally understood everything. I told her I appreciated the update, but I had nothing left to say to him. Not even now. And I meant it. But a week later, a letter showed up at my door. Handwritten. From Damon. His handwriting was shaky, like he'd written it while still on pain meds. It rambled for pages, about the accident, the realization of how empty everything felt, how he had driven to his brother's house the night before the crash and just sat outside, watching Caden stumble around in his third failed relationship in under 2 years. He said it finally clicked. Caden wasn't wise. He wasn't insightful or protective. He was bitter. Jealous. The kind of person who wanted company in his misery. And Damon? He had followed him off a cliff with blind trust. The letter ended with a line I'll never forget: I lost my wife trying to be someone else's version of a man. And now I don't even know who I am anymore. That last line made me feel something I couldn't possibly explain in words. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I just felt done. I folded the letter, slid it into a drawer, and went on with my day. That weekend, I went to a small dinner party hosted by one of my connections. A mix of creatives, small business owners, and people who all just wanted a cozy night of good wine and conversation. And that's where I met Jason. He was soft-spoken but thoughtful. Asked questions that didn't feel rehearsed. Laughed easily, but never too loudly. When he found out I was an artist, he asked what my favorite failed painting was. Not a favorite, successful one, a failed one. We talked for 3 hours that night. The connection wasn't instant fireworks or fairy tale romance. It was steady. Warm. Curious. I wasn't seeing someone through the lens of comparison to Damon. I wasn't measuring what I could fix or manage or avoid. I was just existing. And it was enough. A few weeks passed. Jason and I went on a few more dates. Nothing serious. But it felt like something that could be. Then one afternoon, I ran into Damon. It was purely accidental. A bookstore I hadn't visited in a while. He was sitting in the corner, reading something about mindfulness. His face was bruised, healing, but still marked from the crash. He looked up and froze. I gave him a small nod, more out of politeness than warmth, and turned to leave. But he called out softly, asked if we could talk for just a moment. Against my better judgment, I walked over. He didn't ask me to come back. Not this time. He just said he was sorry. That he wished he had been braver, smarter, kinder. He said that if I ever decided to marry again, he hoped the man truly saw me. Really saw me. I thanked him. And then, just before I turned to go, I gave him a gentle truth I knew he wasn't expecting. I told him I already had someone who saw me. Someone who didn't need a second chance to get it right. His face paled. But he didn't protest. He just nodded, eyes a little wet but calm. And that was the last time I hoped I ever saw him.